Ruthless Compassion is a podcast about how you can turn your emotional shit into fertilizer for success and see your darkest moments as opportunities to transform into a powerful kindness warrior. If you enjoy this podcast, please leave a review wherever you listen. Welcome, Celia Landman, to the Ruthless Compassion podcast.
Thank you, Marcia. Would you like me to introduce myself?
I'd love you to introduce yourself.
Okay, so I have written a book and I'm here to talk a little bit about that journey and what I do and what I can offer and what I'm seeing, what I'd like to engage with others around seeing too. So my background is in mindfulness. I am a mindfulness educator. I have a master's in mindfulness studies. So people go, oh, where do you teach yoga? But I don't teach yoga. So mindfulness is a pretty broad field. And I worked with kids in a rehab mental health facility for 4 years. We're teaching mindfulness to a variety of teens. And I also am a certified nonviolent communication trainer, which is new for me and exciting. And I'm really passionate about that. And I'm a parent. So the book I wrote is really about this journey I am on, about caring for a child. And I was writing about a time where I have 2 children, and one had a concussion that didn't resolve. So he had physical injury. And then I have a daughter, and she has a significant mental health diagnosis. And at the same time that my son was out of school for months and we were baffled, she had a suicide attempt. So she was inpatient in a adolescent psych ward, and I was there with both of them. So I've done practices for many years in mindfulness. Also, I am a Buddhist practitioner, and I've used a lot of those to help me learn how to straighten up and be more balanced so I can be present for my kids. And they're things for people who are caretakers of any kind, whether it's your parent, your dog, your spouse, your clients.
Cool. Well, I just want to cycle back. I mean, what you just said about your family is a lot, and I want to get into that a little bit more. But I just want to cycle back because you talked about 2 different things that you do, and I think that they bear a little bit more explanation, just so the listener understands. So, can you just share a little bit about what mindfulness is and what mindfulness training or teaching means?
Sure. So, mindfulness is it's an ancient part of many wisdom traditions, and we can use mindfulness in awareness. So mindfulness is a way to accompany ourselves with, when I would teach teenagers, I would say, with a special ingredient called kindness. Because I can be super mindful about what my thoughts are, but I can be harsh and critical. So that's not mindfulness. Mindfulness is where I'm seeing what I'm doing. I step out of this enmeshment with my feelings so I can actually observe them and even hold them. I can look at it and go, oh, let me get curious. Let me be non-judgmental about that. So I work a lot with mindfulness of feelings, and all feelings happen in the body. So the body comes along, like it or not. So a lot of the mindfulness work it has to be embodied. Yeah.
Cool. And nonviolent communication. So what is that?
Yeah. So, okay, it does have quite a terrible name, because who's thinking, oh, I have violent communication? It's also called compassionate communication. So it's really about our habituated speech. It's making the invisible visible. So it's a process of learning about how we actually use language, becoming aware of times when, instead of being in objective observation, I'm really judgmental and I'm not owning it. So it's being very clear about what I say And also moving into this place of understanding that it's shifting out of, and this is a really broad thing, of a right wrong paradigm, because usually we've been acculturated to think who's right and who's wrong in any situation. I mean, look at the news, look at any political conversation, who's right, who's wrong. And then we blame and we fight. So the creator of this was born shortly after World War II. As a Jewish person, his family had left Europe, and he also lived through the Detroit race riots. And he just wondered, why would human beings get to a place where they could do this to each other? So it's moving into this idea of everything everyone does is in service of meeting universal human needs. And the strategies that they choose may be problematic or may be violent or may be harsh. But the things they're trying to nurture in themselves are actually universal, beautiful needs. And it is such a different way of looking at life. It's a huge perceptual reorientation, because it's much easier to be violent or, squish down, power over people who we see as bad or nothing like me.
So that's a very kind of dovetails very well with the mindfulness.
Yes. So a lot of mindfulness is interior work where we're doing that. We're creating that awareness in ourselves. I'm getting clear. How am I feeling? What's my heart saying? How can I show up compassionately? Then the piece for communication, I always want to hold both of us with care. So it's recognizing that I'm in relation. If I choose, I am in relationship with you. And so it's always checking in, how is that for you to hear? Or, and I shouldn't say always, because there is no always, but it's, if I want you to feel respected in our relationship, I'm holding both of us with that same respect. Is it a good time for us to talk? I mean, little connections that we can weave in our relationship to really be more transparent about what we're wanting and what's okay.
Okay.
Was that clear? I mean,
yeah, I think that's very clear. Yeah. And I think now we have a good base upon which to talk about your other work, your book. So why don't you share the title of your book with the listeners?
So it's called, I happen to have one right here, When the Whole World Tips: Parenting Through Crisis with Mindfulness and Balance. Because when if it's your child, especially when they're not doing well, it can feel like everything's wrong. There's no resting. There's no ground under us. So it can really throw everything off.
So how do you avoid being completely thrown off when you're dealing with a child in crisis?
Yeah, well, the short version, there's really three key points. And I started writing this as research for my graduate thesis. So when I originally put it together, it's very academic. There was a lot of, studies that were in it. And so this is much more user-friendly. But one of the things that struck me was I saw research they were compassion researchers out of the Max Planck Institute in, I think it's Geneva, Switzerland. And these researchers worked with this automatic pain circuitry. So they took people who were connected in some sort of relationship, and say you and I are going in together. We both get wired up, to the functional MRI machine. And one of us is going to get an electric shock. And even hearing that one of us will get that shock, the other person runs the same pain circuitry minus the locator site. Even hearing that someone they care about is going to be in pain. It's automatic. And, as a parent or a human being over and over, it was like thinking I had some sort of choice around this. Like, oh, I don't have to get so upset. It's like, oh, it's okay to feel it. It's part of my wiring. So one is permission. It's acknowledging how rocked, we're going to be, especially when we don't know the outcome. So another piece is that, the truth of living is, as much as we'd like to, we cannot control the outcome of someone else's life. As much as I would love to say, I'm always going to make you happy. Like I would, if I could, I'd always make you happy. I don't have the power. I wish, I really wish I could. I can't. And also when somebody is sick, we can advocate, we can get them the best care. We can't guarantee an outcome. So it's aware of that. It's such a tender thing. It's just that like, yeah, the worst thing might happen, that I'm going to lose this person. The thing I'm really afraid of, it might happen. And then what happens in me? So aware it's going to hurt, aware I really, as much as I love and I care, I don't have the control. But what do I have control over is showing up for myself. So I call it not abandoning. And I love the name of your, ruthless compassion, because if I only have compassion for the person who's sick or suffering with, mental health or physical ailment, I forget my own. The compassion has to go there to me too. So it's me showing up for this, I'm terrified. I'm so scared. How do I show up for me? Okay, yeah. And then I bring my care. So it's noticing when I'm tipping out of balance, and how do I bring that care back to me? How do I see my pain and be able to, and that's what with the mindfulness piece, where I'm not all in the pain, I hold it. I can hold it. I can caress the edges of my pain if it's too much to be in the middle of my pain. Where is it safe for me just to contact this feeling? So I'm not abandoning, I'm not running, I'm not getting lost in my spiral of anxiety or despair and becoming depressed, or nothing's happening here, or sleeping or not getting out of bed, or we can do it. We can do a lot of things. So that's kind of the mini version. And it's one thing to cognitively understand it, and it's another thing, as all life is, to actually practice it.
Yeah, but I like that you brought the ruthless compassion into it, because I think you definitely understand what I'm trying to get at, which is that, if you abandon yourself in the service of others, you're out of balance. And that, I always say, be there for others, but, not at your own expense. Don't negate your own needs, because that's not going to help you. And also sometimes you have to set limits with others. Sometimes you have to walk away from other people who are, just unwilling to negotiate in good faith. Sometimes you have to give consequences to others, and that doesn't make you a bad person. That just keeps you in balance, right? So I think being in balance is such an important goal, and I think a lot of us don't have that in mind. Do you want to talk a little bit more about balance?
Yeah. So I use this word a lot in the book called equanimity. So in Buddhist tradition, equanimity is this really high bar. It comes right before enlightenment, and we say it's earned, not learned. There's a couple meanings to equanimity. It can often get confused with this idea of kind of like, I don't care. Nothing gets in. I'm equanimous. I'm just sort of like stoic. We have things called near and far enemies. That is the far enemy. So that's indifference. Oh, I'm sorry. That's the near enemy. Near enemy is indifference. The far enemy is reactivity, where we're just like, totally freaked out. So in this word, it does mean balance, but it also means the ability to look over, to take things in and stand in the middle of, which I love, because when I stand in the middle of it, I make a bigger space to hold everything. So, it's like knowing I'm out of balance, knowing, I'm shaky, or my heart is beating really quickly, or I can't even get a breath in this moment. That's what I want to make space for. So it's like starting very close in. And I really like the idea of, there's this image, like if I think the problem is way out there. Oftentimes it's impossible to get there. It's like if I come in the room and I'm wearing a hat and a coat and a scarf and I have my vest and my shirt on and an undershirt, and I say, I'm going to get rid of this feeling. I'm going to take off my undershirt without taking off my coat. It is not going to work. So we start where we are. I start by taking, like, oh, this feeling's so painful or intolerable. How can I be with just this for, maybe I can be with it for 3 breaths. Maybe I need to get somebody else who's calm to sit with me to be with it. So this idea of balance, it's not like, and I've thought a lot about this. If you do yoga, if you ever do yoga and you do any balance poses, watch watch the instructor. I was watching my yoga instructor, and he can do these amazing balance poses, but he's not rigid. The feet, the muscles are constantly moving, constantly adapting, catching, pulling, shifting, because it's like we're not the same. If it were, I'm going to get into one mold and keep it,
It's dynamic.
we wouldn't even need to do balance.
Yeah, it's dynamic,
We'd
it's
fall
flowing.
off.
Yeah, I know I have
So it's
a
that,
pose that I do in yoga that I'm always shifting, and sometimes I'm falling, but it's always moving. Yeah, it's never static.
and that's what life is. Life is constant, like, oh, this is nice and smooth, and then, whoa, or, oh, it's a little bumpy. So my care needs to flow both ways. So that piece about, caring for myself, if I can't care for myself, I'm of no use to anybody else. Yeah.
So I wanted to talk about something that came up for me the other day because I was talking to somebody who's a mom and they were blaming themselves a lot for things that had happened to their kids. If I had been a better mom, this wouldn't have happened. If I had been a better mom, this would have happened. And it's all my fault. And, a lot of negative self-talk. And I was thinking, it's very easy for parents to blame themselves and to feel like their children's struggles have something to do or a lot to do or everything to do with their failings as parents. So how do parents deal with, taking responsibility on the one hand, but not, being responsible for everything? How does the work that you've done help you through that?
That's such a important aspect, because you're touching into like the shame. We have, and I know we can hold the shame in ourselves, but we also have external shame, and I know from having a child with an invisible disability, people often misinterpret our behavior. And in the beginning, there was so much shame around it. Why is your kid, why are they need to know, and hearing like that I'm not doing it right. I'm not doing it because I'm not controlling this other human being. And it's also tricky because when our kids are little, we are responsible for them. We are in this, frankly, codependent relationship with them. And then at a certain point, it's like, well, what is mine and what is yours? And kind of teasing it out and seeing what can they do on their own? What is theirs to hold? Something that I've written about in my book is a lot about forgiveness. It's about this ability to acknowledge that I don't know everything and to forgive myself for not knowing what I didn't know. Because if I could go back in time, I would do things differently. If I knew then what I knew now, if I could have seen, but I couldn't see. So I have a forgiveness meditation that I've developed, and I tell a little story about the first time I did this. I was on a retreat with 20, 30 other people, and we were in silence, and it was this kind of ancient forgiveness meditation. And the first time I heard it, and I just felt so sad. When I listened to it, I just felt so like hopeless because I had no idea how to get there. I thought, this is so far away from anything I know. And then I knew but I want it. I know I want to be able to offer myself that same understanding. So I went home and I wrote this piece about different ways, and it's a practice because I used to think, oh, some people are really good at this, and some people like me who were trained that if I forgive myself, well, I just let myself off the hook. That's not okay. That's okay for you, but not for me. So I went home. I did this practice every day for over a year in order to melt some of the ice I had developed around my own heart to forgiving myself. Because it's a habit that I don't forgive myself. And when I look at what do I get, I know that when I don't forgive myself, I think I'm actually doing something helpful.
You're being rigorous.
Yes. Yes, I'm being more humble or more honest or whatever. But what happens is I actually end up being more ashamed. And there's this correlation between people who do forgive themselves and people who have more resilience. Also, with people who are willing to make repair in relationship and to have more communication. So if I can forgive myself and say, oh, yeah, and go through my, what have I done? And it might not be wonderful, but it was also something that is deeply human. And again, the piece with the NVC, it's like, it's also understanding what needs was I trying to meet in that moment? Maybe I was just trying to feel safe or trying to create a boundary. Maybe it landed in a way I so wasn't intending. And caring for that pain in me, or caring for the part of me that doesn't want to forgive me. And then gradually practicing with this so I can make some space. And I remember the day that I experienced it because I do the meditation every morning. And I remember distinctly, I got to like 10 o'clock in the afternoon. I mean, morning, wasn't even an afternoon. And I said something that had a little bite about somebody, a little judgmental. I said, Rachel's flaky. and then, and then I went, oh, I'm going to have to, throw myself out of my heart. I'm bad. Like, oh, how can you be like, Celia, you're a mindfulness person. Like, why are you saying that? And I went, oh, there's the forgiveness I've been practicing for. Here it is. And here's my opportunity. And it was like spaciousness. And it felt strange because I hadn't known that feeling. I was like, this is what it feels like. Ah. And I was like, Rachel isn't flaky. Sometimes she rushes. Okay, yeah. But I could respond differently. So my short answer after a really long answer is it's a process, and it's a willingness to include ourselves in our own heart and not kick ourselves out of our heart.
And I liked what you said about how when we can forgive ourselves and be more compassionate with ourselves, it actually improves our relationships and it makes more space to repair our relationships. Because if we're busy beating ourselves up, we don't have the space to think about, the thing we said about Rachel, for example, or even change our perspective about Rachel. Like after you forgave yourself, you were able to see that she's not flaky, she just rushes a little bit. So you could also shift that. And that forgiveness creates opportunities, for healing yourself and for healing your relationship. So it's actually the opposite of rigorous. It's the opposite of helpful to be so
Yeah.
self-critical. I
And
wanted to go ahead. Yeah.
no, and it's very counterintuitive because
Yeah.
we think that we're being very, I want to say like holy by not I'm keeping myself in this hell realm because I need to be better, when in fact the opposite of the gentleness, the understanding, that actually can give us, when we see ourselves as being worthy of our own love, then we're more willing to engage with someone else. Because why would we even try to engage with somebody when I'm not good enough?
Yeah. So I actually wanted to take it to another question, which is how I see that a lot of times parents, it's not so much what they even do with their kids that matter the most, but it's how they feel about themselves that they model to their kids. So if you're busy not forgiving yourself, if you're busy criticizing yourself, if you're busy feeling unworthy or unlovable, those feelings get transmitted, those attitudes get transmitted to your kids. They absorb them like sponges. So even though you say to your kid, I love you, you're the best, I adore you, you're everything, you can do anything, but they know that you don't feel that way about yourself, that is what they pick up. They pick up, well, if mom doesn't love herself, then why should I love myself? If mom can't forgive herself, why should I forgive myself? So you want to talk a little bit about how we model these attitudes to our children.
Yeah. Yeah. There's saying, what we don't transform, we transmit. And it's the strongest transmissions are wordless, are just as from behavior. Because, when we're little beings, it's observational learning. What actually are the big people doing? What do the big people do in this civilization I popped into? And one of the most telling ones is anxiety. So there's a lot of research about how a parent's anxiety level can transfer to their kids. And it's even anxiety around their kids not being well, not, any kind of ailment. So that the more are you okay? Are you right? Is this, honey, the more I'm fluttering or helicoptering, my child gets that sense, maybe I'm really not trustworthy. And also the piece you were talking about of, mom doesn't love or forgive, there can be that doubt, like there's just that wariness. Well, maybe it isn't okay, because more is transmitted through our being than our words. And the book I wrote is really about the parents. The best gift we can ever offer our kids is our own peace, our own solidity and balance. Because when we can have that, then our presence is going to support them. If my presence with you is one of, if I'm terrified, there's studies where if somebody's around you and they're really worked up and anxious, it actually intensifies your pain. And especially someone we're connected to, because you're sensing their discomfort. And it's like that allowing of, what is this? With awareness, where it's not that I'm just powering through and I'm not going to feel anything because I'm seeing whatever I'm seeing, but it's I need to know capacity. And I think that's huge for parents. I was talking to a parent today who was very, very concerned about their child's anxiety. And towards the end of our conversation, it was like, do you even want to, what do you want to do? And this person was saying, I think as a parent, I'm always supposed to be there. I'm never supposed to say no. I'm supposed to have, that boundary, like that, I'm a source of unconditional love and support. It's like, honey, I want to give you love and support, and I'm exhausted. Could we talk tomorrow? Or could you call somebody out? And how is it for you? Is that okay for you? Because I'm really needing my reset.
And I think that also gives your child permission to take care of themselves when you take care of yourself, right? Like I remember when I was doing group therapy, and one of the things I kept trying to model to my participants was my own self-care. So I had lots of rules about things that they couldn't do in the group, partly for their safety and partly for my well-being. And they kept saying, look how Marcia takes care of herself. If she can do it, so can we, right? And I think that when we compassionately model self-care, we show the people in our lives that, this is something that they can do for themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like remembering that we have that power, because some of us, especially if we're parents, we've given that power away. And we don't even know, that everyone else is going to provide. You're going to organize my self-care by the amount of care you need. It's, I will only take care of myself when no one needs anything, which may never be ever.
Yeah.
So yeah, and as wacky as it sounds, it's like, I know I've done that. My self-care was really determined by, how are things in my life with my kids? Can I afford to do anything for myself right now? So I actually have this thing taped on my computer to remind me, and it says, a little note to me, it says, take back your power to make the life you want. And part of what I want is to really prioritize compassionate self-care, and to care enough about myself in how I structure my life, how I structure my time. Am I feeding myself with kindness? Am I getting my sleep? Can I do those things how kind am I being to myself?
And now let's pause for a quick word about my other podcast. Since I was a kid, I've loved watching movies. As a psychiatrist, I'm blown away by how film touches us at our core, deepens our self-knowledge, and can improve the human condition. I wanted to let listeners know that I've started a new podcast called Real Mental with Dr. Marcia Sirota. I'm going to be talking with film and TV experts to help people figure out their lives by getting to the truth about mental health on the big and small screen. Some recent films covered are Turning Red, Everything Everywhere All at Once, Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, and Asteroid City. Please subscribe to Real Mental on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts. Well, you mentioned a word, helicoptering, a few minutes ago, and I wanted to kind of cycle back to that because, I've been thinking and talking and writing a lot about helicopter parenting and these parents who are, very, very hovering around their kids and showing up in their workplaces, in their job interviews, bringing their kids lunch. These are kids in their 20s, just really doing so much for their children, cushioning every fall, preventing every pain, talking to their teachers when they have a problem at school, like intervening in every way. And the young people never learn how to stand on their own 2 feet and fend for themselves. So I was thinking, you're a practicing Buddhist. How did the Buddhists conceive of this kind of helicopter parenting? And what do they say about it? What do you guys say about that?
Well, I can't speak for all this wasn't a thing
Right.
2,600 years ago when Buddhism
Right.
was invented.
No.
So I can just give you my take on it.
Yeah.
Speaking independent, I don't, you can check it with the Dalai Lama. In fact, but for me, what I notice, so when I do that kind of intervention like that, inserting myself, it's always an inside job. What comes up for me? So my guess would be, in the moment where I'm showing up at your job interview to give you like the selling points to hire my kid, what am I feeling? What am I feeling in that moment? Am I terrified? Am I clenched? Like, how's my body? How's my mind? And then I love to bring a little NVC into this. What is the need in there? Is it that I so want success. I so want accomplishment for you. That's such a beautiful thing, right? That's such a place of love and compassion. Yeah. So showing up and holding those things. And then that wisdom piece, it's like, well, what could be another way to take care of that, that need for accomplishment in my life, or take care of, because I think in that action, if you don't get that job, or you're floundering, you can't figure out where to get lunch, or you don't eat lunch, say you don't eat lunch. Every parent's nightmare, right? They're not eating. And then how will I be with that emotion, right? So it's always like, oh, maybe, the kind of scramble, the energy of the action is this coming from a place of real open-hearted generosity where I'm just like, I love you. I want you to succeed. I'm here if you need, it's a place of respect and compassion. Or is it a place of, if I don't do this, I can't tolerate my feelings. I cannot tolerate my anxiety around wondering if you are going to eat lunch. So I really encourage parents to take your own inventory. What comes up for you? What is this action keeping you from? What do you think it's keeping you from? And then that kind of double bind is that the more you do it, the more you're afraid. So if I bring you lunch every day and I become more and more afraid you're not going to eat lunch if I don't bring you lunch, I will always bring you lunch because I never want that to happen. So I condition myself. So it's that ability, and mindfulness is one of the core components of Buddhism, is to look at your feeling, include your body, and just start where you are. How can I accompany this? How can I be with this? How can I teach this anxiety to breathe with me, to tolerate a little of this? And then how can I bring wisdom into whatever I'm going to do?
I like that very much. It's about not being able to tolerate one's own feelings and then doing all this intervention with one's child that probably has less to do with the child and more to do with one's own anxiety and the feeling that you don't have control, going back to this need to control things that you can't control.
And the more we try to control, the smaller our world gets. And also, for kids, where they're hearing the control, we can have kind of two basic results. One is that, yeah, you're right, I can't do anything, a real lack of confidence, of trying, of development, or get away from, like, I'm doing it all. And then you get the whole, rebellion. I will do get out, stop trying to control me.
Yeah.
So they can toggle between each other, which is always interesting. Yeah. Help me, drive me to the mall. I hate you. That.
Yeah.
So, being really respectful too, and being honest. Wow, when you don't eat lunch, I get really nervous. I get really scared, and I want you to be okay. What comes up for you when you hear that? Like, any thought, what do you think about eating lunch? How could we make this happen for both of us? So it's making the invisible visible.
Nice. Well, you say that you're a Buddhist practitioner, and I was reading that you studied under Thich Nhat Hahn.
Mm-hmm.
How was that? Because I spent a very, very small amount of time with him and his people one day because they came to a mindfulness workshop that I was attending at Harvard, and it was lovely. We did an outside walk one day with him and his people, and it was a beautiful, like a walking meditation.
Yeah.
A whole group of us going through, Boston, Massachusetts, but I just thought his energy was beautiful. I was just wondering what it was like to study under him.
Yeah. And I have a question. When you were on that walk, like, you're all in silence, right?
Yes.
How was that for you? Like, to feel the silence and the community in that
It was
walk?
lovely. It was lovely. I felt like there was a lot of energy. It felt very full.
Yeah. And there's something so powerful, I find, when we do things like that together in community. So he was one of the biggest proponents of creating what he called beloved community. So we have sanghas, which we practice together. And the thing that I love, I kind of have a funny introduction to his lineage, was both my parents are Buddhist, which is kind of weird for, a white person from the Boston area. But yeah, both my parents are Buddhist, but in different lineages. And I thought I wanted to be, in this like intensive, you're sitting, you're getting whacked with the stick that wakes you up, and you're really rigorous. I wanted this tough, intellectual Buddhism. And then I found out that there was a Sangha that met near me, and it was in the Plum Village tradition, Thich Nhat Hahn. I was like, it's so simple. It's so like, okay. And I went to my first group Sangha, the community that we meditate together, we walk together, we do all these practices together. And we read these things called 5 mindfulness trainings. And they are, just briefly, the first one is reverence for life, so not killing. And the second, and I should know all these because I know them, but of course, now that I'm trying to say them, they're escaping from my brain. So the second one is about generosity. It's about living with generosity. And if you put it in negative, it's non-stealing or taking. And the third is about sexual, like being sexually responsible. It's about true love, what creates love, and how to separate love and craving, and protecting relationship, and protecting children in sexual situations. And the fourth mindfulness training is rights. Actually, I think I switched our orders, but it's loving speech. It's like, how do I speak truthfully and loving and connectively and honestly and really with integrity? And in that one, actually, it is the fourth. There was also the part about when I'm angry, I will do and say nothing and take care of my anger. And when I heard that, I was like, who are these people? Like, who are you? Where, what planet? Like, I have never seen anyone in anger doing and saying nothing and taking care of that. Like, what does that look like? I can't even imagine. And then the fifth is about consumption. It's about nourishing ourselves with healthy food and practicing joy and not taking in toxins, even toxic websites or violence or anything that is harmful to our minds and our bodies. And after that first meeting, I was like, oh my goodness, this is simple, but not easy at all. And for me, one of the biggest pieces was there was generational rage in the house I grew up in. And working with my own rage and transforming that was so profound for my children. And that was a huge, when I was able, after I'd been practicing, learning actually how to put my feet on the ground to feel, to stop the loop with the rage, to get out of just that automatic reactivity, it saved me. It saved my kids. It was huge. And then I started being like, okay, I see the benefit. I'm gonna explore more. So then I started actually going to the retreats where Ty was, and I went to Thailand where he was. And the thing that was amazing to be in his presence, he could look around a room of 900 people, and it was like he was looking right at you. He could see you. And I remember the first time I saw him, I actually I had tears, because it was like he saw everything I'd ever done in my life, and it was all okay. And it was such a place of forgiveness and openness, and that I was pure, I was lovable, and I had never experienced that. So for me, it was like, I found my teacher, and it was really a path of learning to love myself. And he's also Vietnamese. He's passed, he's, we say transitioned. So he's continued. So he's now in all of us all the time. But he comes through trauma. He comes through 2 wars. The Vietnamese people have been through huge trauma. So a lot of the practices are so trauma aware, just inherently, and trauma sensitive. We acknowledge each other. We look at each other, we smile. And coming from a place where, not always being seen.
Yeah.
For me, that tradition where somebody looks at you and they stop, they smile at you, they bow to you, they give you that inclusion and respect. I mean, that was more powerful than almost anything. It was just somebody holding me as worthy in their heart. So, yeah. So that's there's my entry into
And,
that world.
and I can really see what a difference it could make, for someone who's a parent to feel that sense of worthiness and self-forgiveness and letting go of some reactivity. Just those things alone would make such a difference in someone's parenting.
And if you're not a parent, it's not a bad
Oh, yeah.
thing.
Oh, yeah. For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, for any
Yeah.
relationships, absolutely, because 'cause we're always in relationship, and yeah, I find that so much of the bad interactions that we have come from somebody's relationship with themselves that they are then enacting on others. You know, they hate themselves, they feel inadequate, they feel envious of others, they feel resentful, they feel they don't have enough, they feel you have more, they feel disenfranchised, and then they go. And then they wind themselves up and then they go, and that's how they interact. But it's all about what's going on inside themselves. So if we can work, like you said, if we can work on ourselves, the way we deal with the world, with each other, and the world completely changes, you know, from silly little things like not littering, right? Because if we
Mhm.
value ourselves, then we value our environment, and then suddenly we care, and we value others, and we care about the planet, and we care about the animals, and we care about other people. And so we say, okay, maybe I won't throw this thing out onto the street. It's just little things like
Yeah.
that.
And a very big part of Buddhism is this idea, Thich Nhat Hahn calls it interbeing. It's that we co-create. We cannot help but contribute to others around us. Just like the earth is always, I would not be alive without this air I'm breathing, without the water, the air, the food that grows in the soil. That's all been given to me. And even this breath is a gift at every moment. I do not have to pay for it. And it's also the way that the world is letting me know I belong here, that I'm part of, I am a child of this world, the same as animals or birch trees or geraniums, that I too, you've provided for me too. And I think it's so important that we have that kind of attachment, that it's okay to have attachment to this world. And I think that's a little different flavor of Buddhism that Thich Nhat Hanh, he's really about nurturing our joy to be with the hard stuff. And he's somebody who's lost. I mean, he lost his country, he lost his friends. He's been through war. There's been so much loss that the wisdom to nurture what is still beautiful in us, what we still can take in, and have that sense of just peace and love in that moment.
That's beautiful. Well, that's a lovely way to end. And I want to ask you my three final questions before we go, which is, so what are you up to these days, first of all?
Well, I'm doing some book promotional stuff, writing articles and talking on shows and things like that. However, I am writing about my mom passed away. It's going to be a year this month. And I'm writing a year-long journal of figuring out what that was, so what was that relationship, really trying to make sense. So it's like a memoir, but also in present time of how this whole thing's unfolding and what I'm learning about who she was. And I don't know what's going to happen with it because it doesn't have quite the same Buddhist flavor as the other book, but there's more swearing in it. Yes. But we'll see, because some of it's very funny, like looking at this going like, what was that? And the working title is Unaccompanied Minor. So you can get an idea of what my childhood was like. So, and I have 5 siblings, by the way, too. 6 kids in 10 years. So it was interesting. Lots of stories.
I'd
Yeah.
love to read that book.
Well, I'll be, I'll keep that in mind. Yeah. Yeah.
All right, cool. Question number two is, where can people find you and find your book if they're looking?
Sure. I have a website, celialandman.com, and it has you can order the book there. The book is through Parallax Press, which is Parallax, but Amazon has it, Barnes and Noble has it. My website, you can order it right through Parallax. There's a lot of meditations in here, and they're recorded on the website so you can listen for free.
Oh, nice.
And you can see the first chapter. You can download the first chapter there too,
Oh,
and get
very
on
nice.
a mailing list and contact me and whatever you want to do. Yeah.
All that good stuff. All right.
Yes.
Well, so here's the final question, one of my favorites, which is, what is your call to action for the listener today?
Yeah, there's so many things I would like to say, but I can only pick one. I think the next time you notice that judgment about your own self, right? That like, oh, I did it, or oh, go to the place of what was your intention in that moment with so much gentleness. Oh, yeah. I really wanted to show up for my kid, or whatever it was. I wanted someone to hear my side of the story. Oh yeah. Okay. And give that intention the care and that acceptance, the compassion that you would give to someone else who said that to you. There's a lot more there, but that's actually quite a lot to do, to be able to do that.
Yeah. I think that's a good start for a lot of people. And then if they want more, they can read your book.
Yeah. I mean, it's a process of learning to forgive ourselves and learning to really hold ourselves with that esteem as much as we hold other people.
Yeah. Like, why not me? Right.
Yeah. And there's lots of reasons that we don't, maybe that one, nobody else said, why not me? But one of the things I would tell the kids that I worked with was, just because somebody else didn't see you as a gift and see that you are so lovable, it doesn't mean you aren't, that you are a gift and you are lovable. Sometimes we need to remind ourselves.
For sure. Well, that's a lovely note to end on, Celia Landman. Thank you so much for coming on the Ruthless Compassion podcast today. And I look forward to having a look at your book.
Thank you so much, Marcia. It was lovely to be here, and I'm championing this ruthless, yay, compassion. Go. Thank you.
This is Dr. Marcia Sirota. Thank you for listening. Please leave a review and your comments wherever you listen to podcasts. And don't forget to sign up for my free newsletter at marciasirotamd.com, where you'll learn about upcoming online events as well. Also, we love getting referrals from our listeners about future podcast guests, so please email us at info@marciasirotamd.com.